Yeah, so we'll start the session. Uh, so is the screen visible? Anyone, is the screen visible? So yesterday we kind of looked into how, not how, we looked into what Django can do, right? So today we'll start with creating our own Django project. Uh, Creating our own Django project, yeah. First of all, you need to create an actual Django project using the following command. Right? You type in Django admin start project and your project name. Right, so let's say the project name is, let's call it Python 2 for now. Right, so you type in Django admin. This is like the only time you will use this command. All right, so use this command Django admin. Then you say start project and then your project name. Right, the center it will do something in the background, and you can see we have our project right here. Like once we have done that, we'll basically go inside the folder that we created, inside the project that we created, and then we'll run. Then I'll just show you what we'll run. We'll run this file, like this entire file. Right? So we'll say Python manage.py. Like so, we're accessing this file, and then we'll say run server. Right. So with Django or Flask, what you basically need to do is you need to create, you need to run a command which basically starts up a server that takes up all the data and works as a intermediary between your computer and your browser. Right? So we basically run the server and it will just show up some stuff. Right? So it's basically your startup time, your server startup time, your Django version, and uh, your this is where your localhost server is. Right? So you click this, and it moves to the web page. Right? So this is the default web page, which basically tells you that you have successfully installed your let's say Django project. You have successfully created a Django project. Right? So the first step is your first step would be to reaching until here, and once you've done that, you basically completed creating a project, right? So always first try running the manage.py file, the server without any changes, so that you can see this. Right, and once you see this, you know that your installation is successful, right? And when you have to move out of the server, or you have to close the server, you basically press Control plus C on your command prompt, and it shuts down the server. Right. So now if I try to access it, it won't be accessed. Right. It will give me a site not reached error because this local host. When you open a server, the data is passed into the local host, and when the server is closed, the local host has no data to fetch. All right. So it basically says the site is not reachable. Right. So we'll just go with this. Manage.py is which executes all of the commands. And we'll look into them a little later. This is your database. This is created by default. every time a project is created, and this these are your main project files. All right, this init file is basically an empty file, but it declares it as a package. The project is a package. Right, this is used for I guess asynchronous server side stuff. This is your settings file. All right, this basically tells the apps that we will be making where to look for what, and it basically turns on this debug thing. It turns on this debug thing. It is in charge of the security key that is generated. It basically tells the apps where to look for certain files, and this is the allowed host, and this is the most important thing that we'll be configuring. This is the installed apps place. All right. So every time we create a new app, we have to edit this and add in our app. All right. Otherwise, the let's say Django server would not recognize the app as its own, and it would not start. It would not be connected. All right. So this is the middleware that Django uses, and this is the URL config file. I'll discuss this in a minute. And this is the templates. All right. So uh, there are some default templates like the one I just showed you here, which are stored at different place here. Right. So all the templates, all the default templates are stored here. You can create your own templates and give the directories, and then you can use them. So this is what this template variable is. This is, you won't be using it right now. This is basically where to look for the synchronous files and the synchronous server side files. This is your database connection. All right. Uh, if you change this, you can change the type of the database that is created, and this is the name of the database. All right. I'm just showing you this. So uh, if you ever need to make changes, you can see where to make changes. All right. This is the authentication buffer. You do not need to touch this. If you touch this, something may break, and you may not be able to fix it because these are validators. All right. These validates the minimum length. If the password and confirm password are matching, if the password is too common, it checks for all of those. All right. And this is the language you're using. This is your time zone. It is by default the UTC. All right. And these are the uh, and this is the static URL. For example, let's say you need to load an image in a web page. All right. You cannot just say simple href is equals to the location of the file. You will have to basically create a folder called static. Let the web page know that you're using the static folder, and then you can access those files. So these are used for images, JavaScript, CSS, and all of those files that are not native to Django, right? And this is the autocomplete field, which is when you create your databases, right? And in this entire thing, we'll be using this and this, right? So this URL thing is basically, I'll just open this here. This URL thing, this URL file basically connects your Django framework with a different type of apps that you create. I'll give you an example. Let's say we have no app right now. We have this main project only. All right. So we basically say, sorry, you type in here, and let me just hide this. You type in Python manage.py, because now we'll be using manage.py. We'll not be using Django admin. We'll be using manage.py, and we'll say start app, and I'll just call the app main for now. Alright. To do this, we'll do stuff, and we got this main folder. Alright. This is the app you'll be using. Alright. You won't be accessing this. You will be accessing this when you make your web app. Right. So I'll just basically we'll be using this. We'll not be using this, I guess. Yes, we use this sometimes when you configure apps, but not for now. This is where you create your database models, and this is where you create your views or your pages that would be rendered. Right. So now that I've created an app main, as I told you, we have to go here in the settings file. We have to go up and we have to add our app that we created into the installed apps folder, and to the installed apps folder, the list. Right, so we'll type main, main, and do not forget a comma here, so that this is a different object from this. Right, so we have registered main, and I'll just say I will also get include. Now I'll connect the URLs that I access with my main file, main app. Alright, so I'll say inside the URL patterns, I'll say path, and I'll just leave it here for now, and I'll say include main. I guess it's called main, right? So main dot URLs. We'll see if this is right or wrong, but for now it's. This is how you have to pass it. You see this in the break. So we have done this. We have basically told the project that we will be using an app called main, and we have connected our app to a project. So what happens here is, let's say I have not started a server, so this will not work. I'm just explaining this to you. Alright, this is the default location, and not location. This is the default address. Alright, and everything after this will be accessed here. Right. So let's say I say main slash. Alright. So this basically corresponds to the address. This. Alright. Whatever you type here is what comes in after this. This. Alright. So if I leave this blank, this basically means this part. Right. So we have looked at the settings file, we have looked at the URLs file. Now we'll be basically removing this, removing this, removing this, removing this, and we'll be going into the views file, and here I'll say you also need to create a URLs file. URL file. It's not created by default for some reason. I don't know why that is, but for some reason Django Project does not create a default URL file. All right. So you have to pick a URL file inside your main application, and you just copy this, because this is what sets the paths for us, right? Like here, this path, and this is the argument. So in the back end, what it does is it basically associates the admin/admin to access this. Right. So what I'm saying here is, when I do not type anything in front of the default address, I want you to go to mains.url, and mains.url is right here. Alright, so inside the mains.url, I'll just create a similar thing, URL patterns, I guess, is equals to this path, and when I do not type anything, we just also import views. So like import from dot import view. So I'm importing this file because this is a different file and I have to use this file here. So I have to first import it, obviously. So I go, if I do this, I want to go to views dot index, right? And I'll give it a name that would be index. Right, so I'll just create an index thing here, index function here, and I'll return a vendor, and in this case, a response. I'll use a library called render, not library. I'll use a class called render that is already imported and located in Django.shortcuts. And the first thing you pass in is the response. And the second thing you pass is the HTML page, which you have not created, so we'll create this now. So first of all, we have to create a directory called templates, the exact name, it cannot be changed. Then you create another inside it called main. This is just the way it's done and makes no sense at all. Then you say you want to access main slash index.html here, and you want to pass in an empty dictionary here. But we'll talk about this empty dictionary in a bit, but just do this for now. I'll create an empty file called index.html, and I'll give this the title home, and inside h1 I'll say you are at the home page, not page, not page. This will generate no errors, this will generate no errors, and this will generate no errors. So let's try running this. First of all, never forget to run your server. Right, so you run your server, you go to your local host, to the center, you can see this, right? So this was a lot of information to gather. So I'll just explain it once again, and we'll go really slow with this thing because it's very interesting but a little difficult to understand if you miss something. All right. So I'll just close the server for now and I'll explain what I did. All right. Let me just remove these. All right. So first of all, I created a Python project. All right. The Python project comes with these files by default. Right, the manage.py is what is used to run the shell commands. Right. There are a bunch of commands we'll talk about later. This is the default database that is created, and this is a project file. Right. For now, we'll be using settings and we'll be using the URLs. This is for asynchronous server stuff, and this is for synchronous server stuff. We'll talk about this later. Right. So basically, the changes you make happen in the settings file and the URLs file. Alright, the URL file basically connects the project or the server to the apps that we will create. Alright. So if you create an app, the first thing you need to do is connect the project URLs file, edit the project's URL file so that it connects to the main to the app that you created. Right. And how do you do that? you have to first basically import this, because this is not imported by default for some reason. And if you forget this for somehow, you can basically look at the comments that are given here, right? So including another URL configuration, which means including this URL configuration. All right. So first of all, we import include from URLs. This is what we did here, and then we add the URL, and we add the URL to the URL patterns, such that path, and then the address, the relative address, not the complete address, only the relative address, and then the let's say we'll just call it connection. All right, the connection you want to make. All right, these are the other ways to make connections, but it is a more direct way and it is not preferred because uh, let's say you make many apps, all right, and if every app, so and you access every app's page using the functions inside them, it would get really cluttery and it would be a long page of only URLs. All right, so what you should do is basically create a different address for every app. All right, let's say you create an app called cart. All right, let's say you make a e-commerce website, and the cart is a different application which handles whatever is in your cart. All right, so you can assign the cart URL, the cart address, such that when it is used, all right, for example, sorry, not for example, if I say cart, if I say slash cart slash, this would trigger this, and it would make it go to the mains.url. All right, now mains.url is the main app, and inside the main app, the URLs file. Right, so it includes this mains.url when you call the relative address cart. Right, so we'll just leave this empty for now, and then you need to make the changes to the URLs place. All right, now this is where you create the connection with the views, right? With the how can I explain views to you? With the web pages, let's say. All right, so you basically, for now, I guess tomorrow, you basically be using these two files, and you would say that if after the cart, after the connection part, let me just explain it a little better. Let's say if I go to cart, right, and then I say items. So I'll just explain this, and I'll run the server again, and I'll see what I was talking about with the server run. Yeah, so the server is done. Now if I just use this will not run. But if I use slash cart, the relative address slash cart slash, we call it item, right? Items, and we do this, we go here. Right, so what it did was, first of all, this was a default address. Right, then it saw this part here, the main URL, the project URLs file, saw this part and diverted us to this part. All right, and then this file was executed, and then it looked for this part. It looked at this part, searched its URL patterns variable, which has to be the exact same name, obviously, and it matched it with this. All right, so what basically happened is, this was our default, right? This will never change. It looked at this, our project URL file, looked at this, and then sent us to uh, and then sent us to the uh, app URL file, and then the app URL file looked at this, the part after this, and knew which function to trigger. Right. So after this, we told it to go into views. That is where you design all of your views, and we told it to trigger the index function. All right, and we just give it a name so that if error occurs, the framework can tell us the where the error has occurred. All right, so we tell it to go to item.views when it encounters this address. This is relative address. All right, not the complete address. Goes here. It looks for index. All right. Now the index is a fixed signature. All right. The index should always have this response part. Now, what is this response part? As I told you, with the web scraping, the response is the entire web page. Right. This entire web page here, only this part. This entire web page is the response. All right. Now, in later sessions, not chapters but sessions, we'll talk about how to use this response. All right. Response is basically the information that the web page throws at us. All right. So this these views functions should always return something. Right. So if I comment this, would see you would see get the server run again, and this would give us an error. Right. Because every function inside views has to return an object. All right. So we use the return keyword obviously, and then we use the uh, render class. We pass in the response. It has to be fixed. All right. The first argument here has to be response, and the first argument here has to be response. All right. This is the fixed way. Right. This is how it's supposed to be done, and then you tell it to basically what web page is it supposed to render, right? Or what web page is it supposed to use? All right. So it knows that it has to look into templates because of in the settings file I told you here in the templates file, it knows that uh, the template files tells it to always look inside the templates folder, right? So you do not need to include the template templates / part obviously, but it has to be stored inside a file, a folder named templates, the exact same spelling, all lower cases, the exact same way like this. All right, and you have to create another directory inside it called with the same name as your app, and then you can use all of your HTML pages inside it. All right, so we access index, and the index basically accesses this main.html file. All right, and returns it to the server. All right, and the server returns it to the browser. Right. So this is how everything works here. So the project looks at the address, throws it to throws us, passes us to the app. Then the apps.url looks at the address, and then it passes us to the respective function, and the function does its stuff, and it basically grabs the HTML file that it's supposed to show. It The website file passes it to the server, and the server passes that to the web page, and we get this. Right? So it's a complete cycle where the browser gives the address to the server gives us the server asks Django to do its stuff, and then Django throws something to the server throws the same to the web browser, and that's how we get our stuff. Right, so that is how Django basically works. And for now, I'll stop here because otherwise it would get a little cluttery and you'll get confused. But I'll just show you one more thing. Let's say you need to create a dynamic, uh, let's say, a dynamic URL, right? So let's say if you type one, you want the web page to show one. If you pass in two, you want the web page to show two, etc. Right? So what you can basically do is you can go these, right? These right angle brackets. I don't know what they're called. You give in the data type. I'll give it the integer data type, and I'll call this number, right? And then I'll go to the views, and inside the say here, yeah, inside the function that we're accessing with the following address. So you will pass the same variable, all right, to the function that we're accessing. Okay, so let me show you. I will just use HTTP response. From where it was. Um, I think it was from HTTP. HTTP, I guess. Wait a second, let me check. I don't know where to. All right, so you import it from Django Django.http import HTTP response. All right, you do not use this, but I'm just basically showing you uh, how this um, dynamic URL thing works. So I'll just say HTTP response. I'll create a F string. I'll just say the number is, what was the number? Number. Right. So let the server reload. Otherwise it will not run. Yeah. Once it says the server is running, you basically go here and I remove this and I type in 1 and it says the number is 1. I type in 2, it says the number is 2. I type in some random number, it says the number is this random number. All right. So this was just to show you how to create. Sorry, this was to show you how to create dynamic uh, addresses. You do not need to remember this function because this is a completely useless function. It is used for testing in some cases. What this basically does is it just passes this entire thing, this string or whatever is inside the HTTP response to the web page directly, and it basically prints it out. Right. So this was just to show you how you can create dynamic responses. You do not need to. You should not. You do not need to. You should not use this function because it's completely useless, redundant, and yeah, it's completely useless. Right. So yeah, basically what we covered was how to start our own project, and I'll just revise this once more. You start your own project by saying Django admin, start project, and your project name. And it's pretty obvious, but you obviously have to have Django installed on your uh, computer. And then you basically go inside the created project, and uh, then you will only use this manage.py file. Right? You will not use Django admin. You will trigger it using your Python command like you do with PowerShell. You trigger the manage.py file, and then you ask it to run server, right? Which basically starts the server and puts whatever code you just did on the website, not on the website, on the local host, right? Now the local host may vary, but it gives you the location where the server is running. It's uh, almost always this same address, except for I guess 8,000. Here could be 5,000. I guess another variant is a 5,000, right? So you basically click this. It takes you to the localhost server, and it shows us the. Uh, it basically renders the code we just wrote, right? And then to create your own apps, which is you should create your own apps. You should not do everything inside the Python project. You create an individual app using Python, py start app, and the name of the app. And then after this you change this file so that your new installed app is let's say recognized. You change this URLs file so that a certain URL address shows us to the app, and then you change this file so that the addresses can access these functions, and then you change uh, and then you create these functions so that they can do stuff and return it to the web page. So basically this is a very simple working of the entire Django framework. With Flask you will have to do a lot and lots of stuff just to make a simple website. All right. I will not go into it because it is really tedious and I do not like Flask a lot. But yeah, this is how you basically start your project in Django. Right? So I'll just come back. What I want you guys to do is do the exact same steps and try to get the exact same response, right? And try changing something, try experimenting, because after some time, around a week of this, yeah, I guess around a week, I would give you not a project, an assignment where you have to create something out of Django, and uh, if you do not understand the basics, you will not be able to create an efficient website. I mean, you can go off the internet, uh, copy the stuff, but I would obviously know that you've copied the stuff. No one writes documentation in their files, right? So I would know if you copy stuff of the internet because it would have a very clean uh, documentation uh, that someone who is working on an assignment would not solve, right? So I guess that's it for today. And Santosh ma'am,
Yeah, sure.
yes, ma'am, are we done with the attendance?
Yeah, sir. Done.
Okay, so I guess that's it for today. Thank you everyone, and you can leave.